All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending what part of the world you are joining us from. I am Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge, and I'm very, very excited to be hosting Bob Glazer today on the day of his book launch for one of his newest books called Elevate Your Team. If you're not familiar with Bob, he is the founder and chairman of the board of the Acceleration Partners, a premier global partner marketing agency that's won over 30 awards for its world-class company culture, which is made up of a remote workforce of over 350 people. And we're going to be talking a little bit today about how he's been able to accomplish that. He's the author of Friday Forward, which is an inspirational newsletter that reaches over 200,000 readers worldwide each week, and the number one Wall Street Journal bestselling author of several books, including Elevate, Friday Forward, How to Thrive in the Virtual Workplace, and now, like I said, his brand new book called Elevate Your Team. And it really offers a clear alternative to the traditional leadership churn and burn playbook that has kind of contributed to what we're experiencing now, which is the burnout and the turnover. So, Bob, welcome back to Conversations at the Edge. I'm very excited to host you on launch day. How are you feeling?
I'm a little tired, but I'm good. As I said, it's to me launching a book's like the final exam. After you take it, there's a sense of relief, particularly even before you get the grade back and know whether you did well or not.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you here. And for those live, if you do have any questions, as always, please do feel free to type them into the chat. The last 10 minutes are for you. So I want to get right in. Bob, I know your first book was called Elevate. It was for individuals to help them kind of unlock their potential. And now that's evolved over the last couple of years into the book that is launched today is about elevating the team. So can you talk about how that evolution kind of came about and why you decided to write about the team aspect now?
Yeah, I needed a sequel. Seemed like a logical title. No, as I talk about in the book, I don't want to give away too much, but I had sort of this genius idiot epiphany around sort of this framework that I had used around personal development, leadership development, and then realizing that we had some growth challenges on our team and sort of what was the way to solve them, and that the same framework could be applied to the organization. So exactly as you said, Elevate looks at this capacity building framework as the way to improve, I think, individually and to help leaders improve their capacity. Elevate Your Team looks at that same framework, but how do you put these things into the organization and culture? So again, if intellectual capacity is about getting the ability to learn, plan, execute with discipline better individually, at the team level, it's how do you create a culture of learning? How do you create a culture of feedback? How do you create a culture that does these things where people walk in and that's sort of the operating system or the culture of the business or the team? And I think that, as I said, timing sometimes is better to be lucky than smart. I've been writing this book for a couple of years and actually put it off when I came out with my marketing book last year, Moving to Outcomes. But it's hitting the market now when growth has become kind of a bad word because people are tired and exhausted, and they've seen growth be something that just sort of chews up people in the business. And so I think, again, a playbook that says, how do we grow by, if this is the wave, like how do we have people on a surfboard riding the wave up, not like drowning under the wave, which is a lot of what people have felt about growth over the last couple of years. And I think particularly the type of Silicon Valley culture that was kind of, funded by cheap capital. And it was like, look, just grow. And if you break people along the way, just get new people. I don't think that's going to work anymore, or at least right now.
Yeah, and it's not how you built your company. You took a more holistic view around the people inside your organization and wanting to really build them up from within. So I'm curious if you could talk to us a little bit about capacity building, how to build a culture of capacity building, and what that kind of means in the context of your book and an organization rather than an individual.
Yeah. So, and as you said, I think one of my epiphanies along the way was like, look, I want to grow and build a growth company, but I want to work with these people. Like, I don't want to, I have a slide I show like a race car going around the lap, and I don't want to change my tires every time I go around the lap. Like, how do I kind of stick with the people that got us there? So, Yeah, if I think about, the capacity, so let me start with the individual kind of, because I think that helps in terms of how I define them. And spiritual was about understanding who you are, what you want most, and the standards you want to live by. Intellectual was how you improve your ability to think, learn, plan, execute with discipline, kind of your personal operating system. Physical capacity is health, well-being, physical performance, and emotional capacity is how you relate to challenging situations, emotional mindset, and I think the quality of your relationships. So take something like emotional capacity, right? And at the organizational level, what that looks like more is psychological safety. And how do you take kind of trust and vulnerability on a one-to-one basis? And how do you put that in the team? What are some of the practices that you can do to put that in the team? Have people walk into an environment where they feel that psychological safety from day one, where when things go wrong, they don't look at external variables, they look at what they can do better, where the team focuses on things they control, not things they don't control. And they're all things that leaders can do to emulate that. Similarly, working backwards from normally, but physical capacity, right? I mean, again, we're just not someone who's exhausted, tired, a mess, and then shows up to work and is cheery and bright and ready to go. Now they don't, showing up to work is logging on. So it's not like they change. But in the organizational context, it's how do we give people, particularly those that are working from home and in remote and hybrid environment, like how do we create some boundaries? How do we encourage them to prioritize their health and understand that if they're rested and all these things, they're going to show up to work better and more energized, and give them like some time away from work and some actual vacations. I mean, one of the examples I give in the book is there's a huge difference for a leader who says, hey, I'm going on vacation this week. I'm out of office, but with my family. But if you need to reach me, here are the 12 ways to reach me. You can fax me, text me, call me, let me know if you need any help or otherwise. Like all that does is emulate to the team that like you're expected to be on call when you're vacation. I don't have this graph right now, but I shared it last week of a guy who runs a venture firm who said, similarly, out of office, I'm going away with my family this week. We're spending quality time together. If it's an absolute emergency, you can text me at my wife's personal cell number, I think it was, or you can email interrupt my vacation at thecompanydomain.com. And so those two viewpoints just model very different behavior for the team. Similarly, something I've done for years, and I know a lot of leaders do, is like when it's not urgent and it's out of office time and they're just cleaning up some email at 11 o'clock on a flight home, they do delay delivery and have the email send the next workday, and just so that no one feels like they're getting emails. Someone to me said last week that she was always checking emails at 11 o'clock, looking for emails from her boss. And the answer was because there were always emails at 11 o'clock from her boss. Right. And so that's why her kind of sleep was ruined. And look, this is not just, this is not like just, hey, the right thing to do. I think that eventually you're just going to burn these people out and they're going to be exhausted and they're not going to be excited about work. Like, I actually think that if you can create these boundaries, it truly is better for the individual's physical and mental health, and it's better for their performance in the workplace, because you can either play the short game or you can play the long game.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious when it comes to dedicating time, as the leaders and managers of organizations, dedicating the time to capacity building inside the company. How much time are they actually dedicating to capacity building in their daily, weekly cadence versus, executing on the company's objectives?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, that's the balance that everyone's always trying to deal with. But if you just focus on today, I think an organization that focuses on today, it's not ready for tomorrow. So, and people are like, look, they're getting offered jobs, they're offering opportunities. If they're not learning, if they're not growing, if those things aren't happening inside the organization, someone, just asked me to sort of be like a coach or a mentor to them. And I was sitting down with a breakfast and having them. And they were describing like they're just a voracious personal development person. But when they were telling me everything that they were doing about personal development, it was all outside of their job and their organization. And I was like, you're not going to last in this job very long, right? Everything that you need and you're trying to get better, you're getting outside. Like you didn't give me one instance where you're getting this inside the job. So that person is probably about to become a leader at a different organization. So yeah, look, it's about, look, we ought to make the donuts, right? there's the things that we need to do, but you got to have your 20% on R&D, or again, this is a very fluid workforce. This is a very global workforce. This is geography independent. Like if you don't have a great reason for people to be at your organization beyond a paycheck, there's lots of ways to get a paycheck and be part of the gig economy and work as a consultant that they can do.
Thank you for that. So I'm curious now, when you talk about in your book, when you're talking about capacity building and building an organization, there's the graph of how quickly the organization is growing. And then you have how quickly your people inside the organization are growing, and kind of helping balance that and making sure that your people can grow at the same rate so they don't need to be replaced or, end up burning out. I'm kind of curious how you're identifying people's growth and capacity building versus where the company is at, and how do you kind of measure that balance between the two?
Yeah, there's a chart in the book that was sort of one of my epiphanies that led to the book, around kind of looking at this mathematically around what's the growth rate of the organization or team, and then where do people's personal growth rates fall, equal to that line, below that line, at zero, or way above that line, and with extremes being a clear underperformer. If imagine a team that, or organization that's growing at 30% a year and someone has 0% of getting better. I think the flip side of that is a unicorn, someone who actually can get better than grow faster than the growth of the team. Unicorns are very infrequent. So I always say, like, make sure you keep them. And then there's people on the line. And then most of us, I think, fall into that opportunity zone of capacity building, where it's like, look, how do we improve people's ability to be the person who could be ready for that promotion, to be at the line, to move forward, and they won't always be able to do it. And there's a key chapter at the end of the book, like, look, we want to help everyone have the best shot at that, but there's also objective needs of the organizations that we can't look away. I've seen a lot of mistakes in finance. Let's say a team is growing, our company is growing 100% a year, and the top person in finance to start is a bookkeeper, and they're managed to improve into a controller. Well, they're not probably going to turn into a CFO in 2 years. Like, you just can't have enough career miracle grow to go from a bookkeeper to a CFO in 3 or 4 years. And the right answer is probably that they're an ascendant controller, and that you need a CFO, but they will inherently be unhappy about that. But if you make the decision that you don't want to hurt someone and you make them see a CFO and they are not a CFO, what can happen is they'll, like my friend's company, they'll make $1 million mistake with taxes because they just don't have the experience. I'm a big believer in aptitude, right? Aptitude is really important. I think it shows the ability to get better faster, but there are some things where there's a certain level of experience that is required. And I think that matters more as the organization grows. For example, we just hired a new CFO. We most of our team, comes from within. The criteria that we needed for that CFO in terms of private equity, M&A, global transfer experience, experience in an agency environment, like that, we're not going to just find that lying around on our team, right? So that was a case where we had to look outside.
That's great. And I think this transitions pretty well. There's a quote in your book where you say the key to doing this is training your employees not just to excel at the job that you've hired them to do today, but to help them grow to take on the roles of tomorrow. And I think this is really important. There is a limit to that, as you just mentioned. But I think this is super hard to map out for organizations, especially smaller companies. How do they figure out whether their people could become the leaders of tomorrow? They don't know necessarily what the skills are for tomorrow. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on helping some of the smaller businesses.
Yeah, this is some of the holistic better, right? Time management, people management skills, communication, like knowing how to set goals, knowing how to prioritize, like, taking feedback, these are actually all things that you need as a leader or somebody in the organization, but they're all things that help you outside the organization too. I think there are a lot of just general things that make people better that are part of the sort of capacity building, that if you focus on those, again, that's the attempt to lift. And then I talk about both extremes in the book, where you have someone who's not rising fast enough and have to make a hard decision, and someone's rising is really fast. And like, if you don't make room for them, they're going to go be a superstar at a different organization. Both of those are problems, but I'd rather have the person be in the vicinity than to say constantly, God, there's no one on our team that we can fill, our future demand and roles with. So I think, again, when someone is a voracious learner, it is less about the specific skills of the job, and learners get better and improve. And for a lot of us who are going to be in leading and managing, 90% of that, we got to improve our leadership skills, right? That is our job, is managing, leading, and inspiring other people. It's less to do with the product. It's less to do with the service. A lot of that is going to be, how do we show up as a leader? How do we model behaviors as a leader? How do we develop leaders on our team? And those elements are pretty ubiquitous.
So when it comes to leadership and tying it back to, the capacity building of the internal employees, is the role of the leader to try and help people move from, those different trajectories that you talked about in terms of capacity building, moving them up to potentially becoming, an A player or a unicorn? Or is it like accepting kind of where they're at on their own growth trajectory and then just feeding the ones that are going to last? What are your thoughts?
That's a good question. I mean, right. Look, you want to water all the plants. Some of the plants will grow faster than the other plants. And so I think it's sort of two, like, the goal of a leader should want to not keep they would want to see their people rise and ascend and like be a problem that they're ascending so much, right? That a true leader versus a manager would be happy. A true leader would want to grow their replacement and would feel huge pride in replacing themselves, with that, because they're committed to that. So I'd say you want to water all the plants, but they will grow differently. And then you need to make objective decisions about what to do based on, you have a 6-inch plant or a 2-foot plant, and you have a need for a 12-inch plant, right? And so I think that's where the first stage is to try to get all the plants to grow. But then I think good leaders both know when to make a tough decision, know when to then try to create opportunity for that person and push them forward. But yeah, those are kind of extremes that happen once you have that problem. But you want to create that problem in the first place, if possible, which is, I have too many good people and I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, for sure. And just a reminder, if you're here live and you do have questions for Bob, please type them into the chat. Would love to get to those as well. And I'm also going to send a link to his book if you are ready to take the plunge and, buy a copy. But I want to talk, there's 4 areas of capacity building in your book, and we certainly do not have time to go in depth into all of them. But I want to touch a little bit on spiritual capacity. Yeah. We're not necessarily talking about religion, but more of knowing oneself. And I'm curious, why did this make it in? Why is the spiritual capacity so important in your opinion?
Yeah. So so a couple of things. If you follow Jim Collins' sort of level 5 leadership, where you move from a competent doer to a level 5 leader is this ascendant leader who makes everyone else better and is sort of the pinnacle of leadership. It's almost impossible to do that if you're not doing that from an authentic base of who you are at your core. And I think a lot of people haven't done the work to understand how their values, their strengths, their weaknesses affect them as a leader, show up for them. There are certain patterns. And so I think that helping people understand this and become the best version of themselves as a leader is the sort of key to leadership development. I was speaking at a company a few weeks ago, and they gave me their kind of standards for leaders. And they said, can you talk about this in the speech? And I said, sure. And I said, look, here are the standards for leaders. This is how your organization expects leaders to behave. They are not telling you what type of leader to be. Like, these are sort of like shared best practices. Like, a lot of us pull a bunch of best practices from other people and we use them. And then eventually we try them on and we're like, it's what you're like, these aren't really me. I appreciate that Alex did this, or a lot of time we're doing something that was a best practice of a leader we admired, or is the opposite of a leader we didn't like, right? That's a common thing, and it's not really us. And having done this work and having helped people figure out their core values and be able to articulate that, I just seen some really powerful patterns and transformations where people are like, oh, this is who I am. So an example, there's some times when a strong core value comes out tied to some of even the why work that we've done with people on relationships based on trust. And people who have a core value of relationships based on trust, 9 times out of 10, they had a violation of trust in their life that has stayed with them. And so these are people that keep small circles, and it's hard to get in it. And once you're out of it, you are out of it. And what we saw with these leaders when we asked questions was, and we looked at their team and how they were leading, if you were 5 minutes late to a meeting, if you missed a deadline, if you were kind of like can be found at 4 o'clock on the afternoon, like those signaled things to that leader that you are someone that cannot be trusted, and you were in a penalty box and you didn't even know it, and you get out. And so once the leader did this work and they were like, this is a value, they value me, they go back to their teams like, look, I'm someone who really values trust. So here are the things, and I will trust you until I don't trust you. And here are the things that build trust with me: being on time, doing what you said you want to do, being available when you say you're available requires over communication. And you're going to want me to have your back, and just watching like the difference when they're able to, it's kind of like, here's the, shameless grab of my book, but here, I'm going to give you here's the playbook to me as your leader. Here's what I really value and not. And similar for me, like I would say to people like, look, here's why you would love working for me, and here's why you would hate working for me. And they're kind of one and the same, right? As a 40-year-old manager leader, like I'm always evolving, but I'm not going to change now. And I'm not going to change things that are set deep within me since I was a kid. So it'd be better to say to people, this is who I am. This is what I value. I don't care if you're 5 minutes late to the meeting. If you come up with you walk in and you have a better solution, right? It's more kryptonite for me to walk into the meeting and say, we just can't make this better. It just can't be improved. It just can't, there's no way to do that. That sort of violates my primary core value of trying to make things better. So this is why I do think that, understanding their strengths, understanding who you are, then in emotional capacity, communicating that, being an organization where I understand a lot about Alex, and I understand where Alex and I kind of naturally combat. I think that helps solve a lot of interpersonal communication issues, which are about 90% of the issues in most companies I have seen.
So what do you do when maybe there's not necessarily a match for those values with an employee on your team, but they might still be really good at their job? And, yeah.
It's a good question. So in a perfect world, if a company has real values, implicit or explicit, people are drawn to the company because they have shared values. So people should have similar things that they value. There are the cases where someone is really realize that they have not aligned values with the organization. Those kind of are dead on arrival. I don't see those really working out. I think you can drag it out or otherwise. You don't have to have perfect alignment, match up with your boss. But if you have 2 to 3 things where we have really conflicting values, like that may be a struggle overall. You may have similar organizational values, but so there's either being aware of that and knowing how to mediate that, or maybe that person should be on a different team. Again, there are teams in our organization that are focused on our largest, most complicated clients that want something different every day, and it's chaos. And then there's teams that are focused on our predictable, repeatable clients where it's we develop a playbook and we execute it. They kind of attract different people, who some like one and some don't like the other. And I think that's fine. We're all trying to find the right fit. I think about universities, like we've won all these awards and stuff. I do not think we're a great place to work for 98% of the people. I think we figured out the 2% of people who align to our values, the type of work we do, how we work, where we work, that we're an agency. Like that's a very specific set of variables. Having gone through the college process with one kid and now another, I can say like there's a lot of great universities in the US. Some are large sports-oriented city schools, and some are very sparse, suburban, liberal arts campus with totally different set of activities. And it's just a different value prop. And usually the person who likes one doesn't like the other. Both of those people would say they're great schools, but if I took one out of one, and they'd say, I don't like this school. So I think we shouldn't pretend that everything is for everyone.
That's a great point. Appreciate that. So you have a question coming from Rick, who's here with us, asking, how do you assess the coachability of people in terms of this capacity building? It seems like this might be one of the most important things.
Yeah, look, to me, coachability is, do people take feedback and do people use the feedback? I always say there's three types of people I've seen with feedback when they get it. And look, there's a whole thing on how you give feedback, and is it constructive or is it damaging or otherwise? But in generally, there's people who don't want it and aren't going to listen to it, right? And you sort of know what you're getting. There's a second group that listens really intently, and then the next quarter you're talking about the same thing over and over again. They say, yeah, I know I'm going to improve. And then there's a third group that, like, you're never talking about the same thing twice. Like, you talk about something, they work on it. There's always something else, they work on it. To me, the second group is actually the most dangerous. Like, I know what I'm getting to the first group. The second group is like acknowledging, listening, but then sort of not doing the work. Like, the people that are coachable go do the work. They want to get better. They take feedback. They go to improve. They don't. I think the biggest sign of someone who's coachable is you see them making a lot of mistakes, but you don't see them repeating the same mistakes. They go figure out a system, a better way. They study it. They improve that part of their game, and then there's always a different part of their game that needs work.
Yeah. Judy's also asking if you found any key metrics to determine like success in capacity building, I guess, organizationally and individually.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's probably hard to manage in totality. I think I could look at the components of that. Like, are we helping leaders and people in the organization understand their strengths, their values, and those things? Like, we can evaluate that. Do we have a learning culture? Are people getting better? Are they signing up for learning? Are they moving forward? Right. I think we can look at that. I think somewhere between that and physical capacity, you would have engagement. Like, are people happy? Are they engaged? Are they not exhausted? Like, I think these things probably show up in other things. Emotional would probably be the hardest to manage. Again, I think it's more qualitative. To me, an emotionally high capacity organization, you probably could do some aspect of psychological safety and vulnerable, and the ability to be yourself and speak up and give feedback and otherwise. But there is this component of, like, are people focusing on what they control and not what they don't control? And I haven't thought a lot about how you might manage that empirically. Again, I think that might be something more qualitative you'd look at. Like, when I'm hearing our sales team talk about losing deals, like, are they talking about the things that they could have improved on? Or are they caught up in conspiracy and third parties and always someone else's fault? Like, that, those are the types of things I would know if I heard it, that I was hearing hallmarks of more of a lower emotional capacity environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Bob, I want to kind of give you the reins. Any final thoughts on today's conversation? Things you want people to know, when considering buying the book or implementing some of this capacity building work in the organization? Would love to just kind of leave it open for you to share with our leaders.
Yeah, a couple of things. Like, having spoken to a couple of companies in the last couple of weeks, like, the best changes are made 1% at a time. There's a lot of stuff in here. I think saying you're going to wholesale change everything actually doesn't work. Saying you're going to go work on a couple things and try to improve them tends to build on itself. I always got asked a lot about the core value stuff, because I think people understand that and they want to do it for themselves and their team. I talk about it in the book, but I took all the work that we did and I turned it into a course at corevaluescourse.com. It's an hour-long course. People can do it individually. They can do it with their teams. I think that is the most important foundational work to this whole capacity building, because the insights you get about your values and what you care about sort of then leads to all the downstream stuff on, okay, what do you want to learn and get better at? What people do you need to be around? Why do you need to maintain your mental and physical health now that you understand kind of what's important to you? So for a lot of people, I think that's where the work starts. And I talk in the book about it a little bit, but it's just, it'd be a whole book in itself to get into that process. So I think that course is a really good way to dig into that if people are interested.
Will it be a book coming soon?
Yeah, it will be a book. It's not soon, because this book has has taken a lot of energy out of me. I finished the draft. It actually is going to be a parable. I think values is almost a better show, don't tell. So I've taken a parable approach to a person who is is going through life. And I talk about the big three and core values, which is kind of your vocation, career, your partner, and then your community. I think those things have to be core value aligned or they don't work. So this person is going through some questions around all of these, and then, kind of learns how to figure out their core values. And then you see where they land on those three elements of their life.
Very cool. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining our community today. It's always a pleasure learning from you and getting to speak with you. And I'm halfway through the book, so can't wait to finish the second half. And I hope that the community takes the opportunity to get a copy as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thanks for having me on launch day.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day and best of luck.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.